Here's something I've been a fan of for literally years now, Displate. This is me back in 2018 rocking my Displates, and I'm still at it in 2025. What are Displates, you ask? Well, they're essentially posters that are better, cooler, more convenient, and more durable than regular posters because they are made of metal. They're super easy to install and you don't have to worry about damaging your walls with nails or hooks or whatever. Just attach the magnetic pad over the protective sheet, press firmly for 5 seconds, and boom, you are ready to hang your Displate. They have over 2 million original and licensed designs to choose from, but they also have a super limited edition collection that's only ever available for a limited time and in very limited quantities. This week, it's these incredible Doom the Dark Ages 3D prints. There's one for the Slayer and one for Prince Azric, and they just look stunning as a pair. They are each hand-signed by Displate's master craftsman and individually numbered as well, and there's only going to be 1,000 of each of these available. Once they're gone for good. All Displates are manufactured in the EU, but no matter where you are in the world, they'll arrive in only around 4 or 5 days, making them the perfect last-minute gift option or just a chance to spoil yourself. Best of all, Displate are offering a massive discount to viewers of this channel. Get 25% off when you buy 1 Displate, 32% off when you buy 2 or 3 Displates, or 37% off when you buy 4 or more. Offer not valid on limited edition or Lumino products, but everything else is fair game. Just use offer code SKILLUP at checkout after clicking the link below. Thanks Displate for sponsoring the video. Gamers, coming at you a day early today because shit is about to get wild. This video should be going live about an hour after Sony aired its State of Play showcase, so in classic This Week in Video Games form, we'll have to wait until next week to cover that one. Tomorrow, the Switch 2 launches. The day after that, Jeff Keighley hosts his annual Summer Games Fest webinar, and 2 days after that, Xbox throw their annual showcase, including a deep dive look at Outer Worlds 2. Sadly, not Outer Wilds 2, but hey, Outer Worlds 2, also nice. So huge amounts of news and reveals to look forward to over the coming days, so we thought we'd go out a day early this week just to clear the decks ahead of all that madness. And I personally am very excited about it because I will be over there in LA. I have a 13-hour flight, which is the perfect opportunity to put my Switch 2 through its paces, so long as it actually arrives in time, since I have to leave my house at 2 p.m. for a 5 p.m. flight. And I'm just hoping that the courier doesn't arrive at like 2:05, just in time to see my taxi pulling away. 1 like equals 1 prayer to the FedEx gods. Please help your boy out. What else is happening? Oh yeah, I got my Death Stranding 2 review code. Wait, did I just make that sound? I am more excited than I thought after spending 30 hours at Kojima Productions playing this thing. You'd think I'd be at least a little bit, been there, done that. But the truth is, I loved it so much that I've been absolutely jonesing for more of it. Genuinely don't know how I'm going to get Summer Games Fest, Switch 2, and Death Stranding all done in a single month, so do wish me luck. And finally, yes, I will address the issue head on and be totally honest with you and say, Claire Obscure video is still coming. I know we joke around a lot about it these days, but jokes aside, it's coming, it is not cancelled. I have something to say on the matter, and I've already written and edited a bunch of it, but to be honest, we're doing something a little special with this one, so it's taking more time, and I don't want to rush it because it's a really special game, and like my mum always says, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. So please indulge me just a little longer. I promise I will not let you down. All right, that concludes one of the lengthiest intros ever. Hey, did you guys see that Witcher 4 gameplay yet? No, you didn't, because that, and I cannot stress this enough, was not gameplay. So now you've probably seen a video doing the rounds. It purports to be the first look at The Witcher 4, and it sort of is, but it also sort of definitely isn't. And I think CD Projekt Red are being a little cheeky here, but I'll explain it from the start. A few years ago now, CD Projekt Red announced that they were abandoning their Red engine that they used in the development of their previous titles and were making the jump to Unreal Engine. Not only that, they also said they were working in tandem with Epic to improve Unreal Engine, with specific focus on changes that would deliver better open-world RPG experiences. As a result, both The Witcher 4 and Cyberpunk 2 are currently being built in Unreal Engine, and while Cyberpunk 2 is still a long ways off, The Witcher 4 is the next cab off the rank for CD Projekt Red. They've already done a cinematic reveal trailer, and just yesterday we got our next look at it, sort of. What you're seeing here was shown off during Unreal Fest, which is basically a developers conference hosted by Epic. This was kind of their marquee showcase, a look at The Witcher 4, but do note how this was introduced.
This is a technological showcase set in the world of The Witcher 4.
Okay, so just to reiterate, this is a technological showcase set in the world of The Witcher 4. It is not gameplay of The Witcher 4. It's using the characters and setting of The Witcher 4 to showcase what Unreal Engine can do. It is not a demonstration of what The Witcher 4 will look like. But just as you'd expect, everyone thinks this is gameplay. A quick scan of any social media platform will show you hundreds of mouth agape reactions, everyone blown away by how good The Witcher 4 gameplay is. And look, to be honest with you, I don't blame these people. I don't think you can expect your average punter to understand the concept of a tech demo as distinct from an actual gameplay showcase. Like, you're scrolling through TikTok, you see this, and immediately you're like, wow, The Witcher 4 looks great. I'm pre-ordering that shit. So personally, I think that this was kind of a bad move for CD Projekt Red. I don't think they made it clear enough that this was not gameplay. For example, there isn't a watermark label over the footage as it's playing. It really just sets them up for heartache in the future when actual gameplay is released and it looks nothing like this. And it will look different, by the way. Like, yeah, this is running on a base PS5 at 60 FPS, but there's no actual video game here. There's no systemic gameplay elements running in the background. It's just a visual presentation, and it's great, don't get me wrong, but man, I went through the cyberpunk shit. I experienced it firsthand. I think the last thing this studio wants to do is show off visuals that they can't one day deliver. And look, I'm sorry to be so cynical, but remember this video from 5 years ago when Unreal Engine 5 was first revealed? Do we have any games that look and run like this 5 years later? No, we don't. So tech demos should never be trusted. They're nice pieces of marketing, but that's really about it, and the wait for actual Witcher 4 gameplay continues. In other CD Projekt Red news, they did host an investor presentation recently where they provided an update on sales and current projects. The Witcher 3 has now sold through 60 million units, and Cyberpunk's Phantom Liberty expansion has sold through 10 million units. Revenue is steady year on year, but the team has expanded to 730 people, making them one of the biggest studios in the world right now. 422 of those people are hard at work on The Witcher 4, with the rest of them working on other projects, including Cyberpunk 2, which has now officially entered pre-production. That's the phase where you kind of know what you want to make and you need to lay the foundations for how that's going to be done. Once that's done, you then go into full production where the project gets a huge injection of resources until it ships. Given The Witcher 4 is still many years away and that Cyberpunk 2 is only now entering pre-prod, I wouldn't be expecting Cyberpunk 2 to be launching anytime before 2030. Oof, when you say it out loud like that, it really does hurt. Moving on now, and let's take a look at the release of Elden Ring Night Rain, a game that should have been a bit of a slam dunk given the popularity of the license and how much people love summoning in buddies to help on tough boss battles, but the actual landing for this thing has been much bumpier than anyone could have anticipated. By the numbers though, this is already a huge smash hit success for FromSoft and Bandai Namco. On Steam, the game hit a peak concurrent player count of around 313,000 people, making it one of the most successful video game launches in history. The 43rd most successful launch, to be precise. The 42nd game, by the way, Destiny 2. Just thought I'd throw that in there. You're welcome. We don't have player counts for PlayStation or Xbox, but we do know that the game has sold through 2 million units on day one, and as of last night has now sold through 3.5 million units, an absolutely huge result. So commercially, it's a big tick, and you have to expect the Bandai Namco shareholders are very happy. But what about the people playing it? Are they happy? Well, it kind of depends who you ask. The critics were less than bowled over by this one, we'll put it that way, especially compared to how they usually talk about or score FromSoft games. On OpenCritic, Night Rain sits at a strong 80 with very little variance among those scores. They really did almost all land at either a 7 or an 8. PC Gamer were at that upper end, scoring at an 80, saying, quote, Elden Ring Night Rain is just as confusing and abrasive as FromSoft's other games, but there really is nothing else like it, end quote. While IGN gave it a good old-fashioned 7 out of 10, saying, quote, when Elden Ring Night Rain is played exactly as it was designed to be played, it's one of the finest examples of a 3-player co-op game around, but that's harder to do than it should be, and playing solo is poorly balanced, end quote. That review touches on a number of the things that have plagued Night Rain since its launch. It really is a case of FromSoft facing off against the final boss of Japanese game development, designing multiplayer infrastructure and systems that don't suck. Capcom's Monster Hunter is terrible at this, every single Nintendo game is terrible at this, and anyone who's tried to summon in a specific buddy to a Dark Souls or Elden Ring boss has long known that FromSoft have always been terrible at this, and Night Rain just brings those shortcomings into sharp relief. There is no crossplay here. In-game communication tools are painfully basic and don't really enable match-made teams to truly collaborate together. Crucially, there's no support for duos. You either need to play by yourself, which is terrible because the game is deliberately not balanced around that, or you need to bring 2 friends with you or matchmake so you can play as a trio. There's no option to play just with one other friend. It's either 3 or 1 and that's it. And that's pretty dumb for obvious reasons. Combined with a number of technical and server-side issues, Night Rain actually launched to a mixed rating on Steam, but has since rallied to achieve a net rating of 72% after over 56,000 reviews counted. Definitely a much lower score than what FromSoft typically deliver, Shadow of the Erdtree stuff aside, since people were a little bit salty about the difficulty balancing of that one at launch. Remember that whole fiasco before everyone discovered the Shadow Tree fragments? Good times. Anyway, the game's director, Junya Ishizaki, has been really upfront about the fact that, at least when it comes to duos, FromSoft just kind of messed up here. Quote, the simple answer is that this is simply something that was overlooked during development as just a 2-player option, so we're very sorry about that, but this is something we are looking at and considering for post-launch support as well, end quote. So that's nice, but what about the whole solo mode thing? Well, that's getting fixes too, actually, with FromSoft announcing that you're going to be able to self-revive once if you die in a boss, and they're also upping the amount of runes you get during a run. So overall, a commercially successful but very rocky launch for FromSoft, far more rocky than they're used to at least, and now they'll no doubt settle into that long post-launch update march. I do wonder how long the legs on this thing are though. I played it, I just wasn't much of a fan of the pacing. It's quite antithetical to what I come to these games for, but everyone plays them for different reasons, so I do wonder if there's going to be enough people to keep the player base healthy over the longer term. Time will tell, I guess. Moving on to other news now, and remember how Phil Spencer has been all hot and heavy for a handheld for years now and wouldn't stop talking about it, and reports were that Microsoft were actually working on one and it would probably release at the same time as the next Xbox? Well, if any of that were true, it probably isn't now. This report comes from Windows Central, who were the first to report that Microsoft was considering a foray into the handheld gaming PC market. Back then, they said that Microsoft were actively developing a first-party handheld that would launch alongside the next Xbox in around 2027. It would be a native device, not like PlayStation's Portal, which is cloud streaming only, and it would be a pretty ballsy move for a company that is not doing so crash hot on the hardware front right now. Do note that this report is separate from the report that Xbox were also working on a third-party handheld in partnership with ASUS. Apparently, that handheld is basically finished. Some photos of it have already leaked, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if we saw it revealed during the Xbox showcase this weekend. It's essentially an ASUS ROG Ally with some different ergonomics and a dedicated Xbox button, and honestly, that'd be a pretty solid machine since the ROG Ally was already a great piece of kit. So full steam ahead for those plans, but Windows Central say that those other first-party plans have now been nixed. Microsoft are no longer actively working toward the development of a first-party handheld and will instead redirect that effort towards increasing Windows 11 gaming performance. That last part might sound a little weird and confusing, so allow me to explain it. A while ago, Valve released Steam OS, which is basically Linux except it's pointed at one thing and one thing only: playing video games. Front and back end were both optimized to deliver an exceptional user experience, and that's why the Steam Deck is my handheld of choice. Even though the Lenovo Legion Go and the ASUS ROG Ally are more powerful handhelds, having to use Windows 11 on a handheld is just a really shitty experience, to the point where it's worth going with a weaker device in order to avoid having to do that. But that gap between Steam OS and Windows 11 widened even further in the last little while, as Valve have now rolled out Steam OS to other devices, like the Lenovo Legion Go S. That product comes with both Windows 11 and Steam OS configurations, and that allows for a like-for-like comparison, and as demonstrated by one of my favorite tech YouTubers, Dave2D, games running on identical hardware run better when they're running through Steam OS versus Windows 11. So the front-end experience is better, the back-end performance is better, and now you can see why Microsoft have a bit of a problem on their hands. Then there's the fact that Microsoft were going to try to take a swing at the handheld market, which is absolutely dominated by Nintendo, to the point where over 150 million Switch consoles have been sold, compared to an estimated 4 million Steam Decks, by far and away the most successful handheld competitor. Finally, there's the most pertinent question. If Xbox can't even sell Xbox consoles right now, what chance have they of selling a handheld? Like, would you buy one? This is a company that is clearly moving away from hardware. Frankly, I never thought an official first-party Xbox handheld could come to market because it just doesn't align with their strategy in any way, shape, or form. So the news that they're walking back from this plan is hardly surprising. But don't infer from this that Xbox isn't doing well right now. Their hardware sales are plummeting, but software sales are up, Game Pass subscriptions are massively up, and the sheer quantity and quality of first and third-party bangers that Game Pass delivers makes it too good a deal to ignore. The future of Xbox is in publishing, subscriptions, and cloud, and I don't think Satya Nadella is going to lose much sleep over leaving the handheld market to Nintendo. Changing tack now, and one outfit that's not doing so crash hot at the moment is People Can Fly, makers of Bulletstorm and more recently Outriders. We all knew that Outriders didn't perform as expected and has still not generated any royalties for the studio, despite being a fairly solid looter shooter with some excellent itemization and class design that really understood the assignment. Since then, that studio has really been on the back foot, cancelling a number of projects and laying off staff across various offices. This past week, the same thing happened again. The CEO took to Twitter on Sunday night to announce, quote, "Today we made a very difficult decision to suspend the development of Project Gemini and Project Bifrost. The relevant current reports have been released to the market. As a result, we have to significantly regroup as a studio and scale down our teams, which hurts the most. We wish to express our deepest regret and sadness over how these events have unfolded and our sincere gratitude for everyone's contribution up to this point," end quote. So what were Project Gemini and Project Bifrost? Well, Gemini is an interesting one because it was being published by Square Enix even after Outriders didn't do so well, and even after Square Enix pulled up stumps on their Western operations and sold them to Embracer Group. A real monkey paw deal that one was. We never knew what this game was, but late last year, People Can Fly were telegraphing that it probably wasn't going to happen because communication between them and Square Enix just wasn't working and they weren't able to come to terms on the future of the project. This all came to a head this week as the announcement read, quote, "The suspension of the Gemini project is a consequence of the fact that the publisher has not presented us with a draft of the subsequent content writer to the publishing agreement covering the terms and conditions of further milestones on Project Gemini, and the lack of communication from the publisher as to its willingness to continue or terminate the Gemini project," end quote. Very unusual that a project would end this way. We've reached out to People Can Fly for comment on the matter, but at the time of recording, they have not yet replied to us. Project Bifrost was a VR game. People Can Fly did release VR Bulletstorm a little while ago, and with the sorry state of VR right now, you can kind of understand why that project was a bit of a long shot. They say that when Gemini was cancelled, they needed to do some belt tightening, so Bifrost got the boot. A real bummer for this studio, but the good news is that they still have other things going on. They're currently helping out Microsoft on the development of Gears of War E-Day. They're putting out an original game, an extraction shooter called Lost Rift, which just had a closed alpha test actually. They're working on something for Krafton, currently known as Project Echo, and they're also working on something called Project Delta, which is a new prototype based on Sony IP. A SOCOM revival, maybe? I pulled that straight out of my ass, but I'm not gonna lie, I'd love to see it. A quick lightning round to finish off. Cliffhanger Games will work on a Black Panther game before EA shut them down last week, and thanks to Jason Schreier, we now know a little bit more about why it suddenly ended. Apparently, Cliffhanger had been in pre-production on Black Panther for 4 years, roughly the same amount of time it took Sandfall Interactive to make the entirety of Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Cliffhanger were also apparently working on their own unique take on Shadow of Mordor's famous Nemesis system, one that would see the scroll enemies remember how you approach things in different gameplay scenarios. It sounds interesting, but sadly we'll never get to see it for ourselves. Plus, I bet that EA were already in the process of patenting it, so we'll never see it anywhere else either. No Ubisoft Forward this year. Ubisoft has confirmed that for the first time in a long time, they won't be hosting a showcase during the Summer Games period. No Just Dance musical number for us, I suppose. It's a damn shame, that is. To be fair, Ubisoft don't have a lot dropping this year, and they're really focused on trying to dig themselves out of the current ditch they're stuck in, so it isn't too surprising to hear they're sitting this year out. Oh, but they did randomly tweet out a photo of Sam Fisher in Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, so I guess that's what we're getting in place of a showcase this year, just a cryptic tweet. The Nintendo smartphone app has been updated in preparation for the launch of the Switch 2. You can use it to access certain in-game features like viewing the map in Zelda or saving Ultra Hand build schematics for quick access. It'll also let you initiate and approve game chats, but most importantly, you'll use it to share screenshots you've taken in-game. That update is available right now. Some quick sales data to top you off, and Fantasy Life I has gone gangbusters. Already 800k units and an expectation they'll hit 1 million units in June, so congrats to them after what was a pretty rocky development timeline. Neo has now sold 8 million units, and that's great because Neo rules. And Atomic Heart just celebrated 10 million players, though you have to guess that a bunch of those are courtesy of Xbox Game Pass. Atomic Heart was weird, man, like really weird, kind of almost good, but also had some stuff in there which was super bad, not least of all an endlessly respawning open world and the super cringy vending machine lady. I am no prude, but she was making even me uncomfortable.
I can't wait for your strong hands to grope my interface with lustful abandon.
So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, I'll tell you what, this week's show is definitely situated in the quiet before the Summer Games Fest storm, because there ain't too much to cover this week. The big one worth mentioning is Pokemon Legends ZA, which threw down a release date last week, 16th of October for the Switch and Switch 2. As a reminder, this is the good, or at least the better, Pokemon sub-series for catching and battling Pokemon take place in real time. The first Pokemon Legends was set in the past, but this one is set in a more modern setting, in a very stylized version of Paris, first introduced in Pokemon X and Y. The hilarious setup for this one is that when night falls in the city, all the Pokemon trainers come out to participate in a citywide fight club, which is actually kind of cool, to be honest. Also, there's parkour because France, I guess. It would be kind of funny if Ubisoft sued them for patent infringement. give Nintendo a taste of the medicine they're currently force-feeding to the Power World developers. Nintendo also confirmed that those who get the Switch 1 version can upgrade it to the Switch 2 version for $10, which should hopefully improve the visuals and frame rates. But with a Pokemon game, you just never know. They also announced a Pokemon Present showcase for July 22nd, which I assume will be a deeper look at the game. And that is that. Shift Up also made a smallish announcement this week, releasing the first piece of art for their next game, tentatively titled Project Spirits. This one was previously called Project Witches in their investor presentations, and if you know anything about Shift Up games, then this piece of art probably won't shock you in the slightest. They're calling it, quote, a subculture cross-platform title that embraces the concept of Eastern fantasy, end quote, and they're recruiting for a bunch of positions. The job listings call for things like experience with Unreal Engine 5, planning JRPGs, anime games, open world environments, and dungeons, so that kind of gives you a sense of where they're going. This one's not due out until 2027, however, and we know the company is also working on a Stellar Blade sequel due out around the same time. Speaking of video games that prominently feature bouncing physics-based objects, Sega announced a new soccer game this week. Sega Football Club Champions 2025 is a free-to-play football management sim for PC, PS5, iOS, and Android, which is, quote, powered by Football Manager, end quote. Really curious announcement given that Sega cancelled this year's annual Football Manager installment. Feels like they really want to plug the gap here without compromising the integrity of that franchise. Anyway, the Japanese trailer for this one went with the old faithful nostalgic angle where they're like, hey, remember what it was like when you played games as a kid? Which seems to be like 80% of Japanese game commercials from what I've seen. Here's something I am very pumped for, the James Bond game. IO Interactive dropped a title for it this week. It's called 007 First Light. And more will be revealed in a showcase that's happening on Friday this week, just after Keeley's presentation. I don't love the name First Light, to be honest. It doesn't sound very Bond-esque. Maybe it just reminds me too much of Destiny, so I guess that's really on me. I shouldn't complain. In other news, a little tidbit that popped up this week came from Giant Skull, which is a new studio founded by Star Wars Jedi director Stig Asmussen. They announced a publishing deal with Wizards of the Coast to make a, quote, all-new single-player action-adventure title set in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, end quote. After Baldur's Gate 3, Hasbro are surely on the hunt for another banger, and the Star Wars Jedi guy might be a pretty good place to look for one. Some more news out of Japan this week. Tango Gameworks popped up to say, hey, we're so happy to be alive, while showing off a studio rebrand. It's all in service of them going on a hiring spree to start, quote, early work on an unannounced action game, end quote. Love to see that this studio still exists despite Microsoft's best efforts. The last one for this week is Down Under, courtesy of a two-man studio called Powerhoof. These guys made Crawl, which was an excellent multiplayer dungeon crawler that famously featured a giant Gabe Newell as a boss, something Gabe 100% approved of, by the way. Anyway, this new one is called The Drifter, and it's a dark and pulpy point-and-click adventure game where you play a murdered drifter come back to life, solving the conspiracy that led to his death. Got some really stunning looking pixel art, a great grindhouse vibe to the trailers, and some authentic Australian voice acting, which is definitely not something we're used to in video games. This one is out on July 18th for PC. So what came out last week? Well, Sol Kesto or Sesto was one of the games we featured on Put This On Your Radar a couple of weeks ago. This is that roguelike dungeon crawler with the really unique looking art style and gameplay that revolves around you trying to skew RNG to your favor as you drop your hero onto a grid of enemies and treasure. We had a really good feeling about this one, and it seems like we were right. It hit overwhelmingly positive ratings on Steam with over 700 reviews at the time of writing. Here's a review from Steam user Guaracia, quote, this is a great idea for a roguelike that's executed really well with some pleasant and or gross, up to you, visuals, making everything so focused on pure random chance and then offering the player options that allows them to turn the odds in their favor is like a pure distillation of the fun inherent to this genre, end quote. Well said. Next up is 2AT, which is a new one from Katamari Damacy creator Keita Takahashi. It's a slice of life game where you play as a teenager permanently locked in a T-pose. This guy does not like to make normal video games, and that's probably what's being reflected in its fair OpenCritic score of 72 with a range of sentiments. On the lower side is GameSpot with a 6 out of 10. They said, quote, it's a cute and charming visual metaphor with some insightful and funny writing, and it's a lovely parable about the struggles of growing up and feeling different. It's a very gentle, likable story about a topic that games don't often explore, but the story doesn't have quite enough heft to last through even the relatively short playtime, and the act of playing it often feels tedious, end quote. On the other end, you've got Games Radar, who scored this one 4 out of 5, remarking, quote, the whole thing is nebulous by design, and it isn't so much a grand gesture of positivity as it is an ode to the little quirks you love most without realizing it, end quote. A reminder that this one is out on Game Pass, which is kind of the perfect opportunity to see if this kind of weirdness is for you. Speaking of weird, Fuga Melodies of Steel 3. This is the intense military RPG that stars a cast of furry characters who you can choose to permanently sacrifice to kill bosses if you're having a hard time with them. This one came out at a very strong 83 on OpenCritic, but if that piqued your interest, it seems that you might want to head back to where it all began. Here's Cog Connected, who gave it 80 out of 100, saying, quote, "There's an excellent focus on character and the heavier narrative moments hit hard. It's strange to play a JRPG with no world exploration elements, but Fuga Melodies of Steel 3 offers the most options and replayability of the trilogy. The Fuga games have continually improved while keeping the same core mechanics. This final game is the best of the trilogy, just don't play it until you've beaten the other two," end quote. It's quiet this week, so we're going to do the unthinkable, read reviews for an F1 game. F1 25. Oh man, I really hope you don't need to have played the first 24 in order to enjoy this one. Hope you like that one. It's hit a respectable 79 on OpenCritic, but not without basically every reviewer saying, "Yep, this sure is another one of them. Thanks, EA." Here's PC Gamer, who scored it 74 out of 100, saying, quote, "F1 25 feels like fundamentally the same game for arguably the 7th year in a row. Oh my god. Combining F1 World, Breaking Points, Return, and Career Mode, it's very, very similar to F1 23, only not as fresh or as enjoyable as that game felt on release. It's not practical or even possible to keep rebuilding a game this big from the ground up year after year, but when so much familiar content is being repackaged as full-priced iteration, it feels like more radical change is needed soon," end quote. All right, so that is May done. What is coming out this week? Well, it's June 5th time, so you know what that means. It's Switch 2 launch day. For all of you lucky enough to have won a pre-order lottery, or deemed worthy enough to get a pre-order from Nintendo directly, or brave enough to fight and survive the online checkout system of your least favorite retailer, or blessed enough to live in Australia, where pre-orders seem to still be perfectly abundant. Like, you can just walk into a store here and get one right now. Super easy. With the Switch 2 comes a hefty lineup of launch titles you've probably already played before if you own a gaming PC or a console, but have you been able to play them on the toilet? Probably yes, if you owned a Steam Deck, but probably not otherwise. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. Leading the pack and sure to be Nintendo's best-selling game year after year for the next 8 years is Mario Kart World, which gets rid of all the anti-gravity underwater stuff from 8, takes the series to a big open world, features a whole host of new races, including everyone's favorite, Cow, and makes you drive from race to race because there aren't already enough inconveniences in the real world. I just uploaded a preview for this one last night. I really liked it. It's still Mario Kart, of course, but it's a big, juicy package, and I think you're going to enjoy yourself. At least I did in the 5 hours I spent with it. The other first-party launch title, in inverted commas, is the thing that no one wants to pay $10 for, but certainly a lot of people will. It's the Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour. This is essentially an extended walkthrough of the Switch 2 system featuring fun facts about its design, some little mini games to show off the features, and that's basically it. I know a lot of people are secretly holding out hope that there's some like deep meta game hidden in there, like Animal Well or something, that makes it worth the price of admission, but I highly, highly doubt that. Would love to be proven wrong, of course. The other offerings from Nintendo at launch are enhanced version of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, which will have improved visuals and functionality for Nintendo's smartphone app. Those upgrades are sold separately, but are also included if you have a Switch Online membership and own the originals. There are a couple of Switch 2 exclusive third-party titles. One is called Fast Fusion, which is basically a Wipeout-like futuristic racer, and the other is Survival Kids, a sequel to a somewhat obscure Game Boy RPG game from Konami that preempted the whole survival crafting genre back in 1999. Now the sequel looks like every other game in the genre. Surprise! Sega's got a few games coming out on day one, including a director's cut of Yakuza 0, arguably the best game in the series, as well as Sonic X Shadows Generations and Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S, a game that rarely changes, but people still keep buying it. Capcom's got a version of Street Fighter 6 featuring all the DLC characters released to date, as well as the severely underrated Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess. Please don't skip that one, it's actually excellent. EA's putting out its best chance at Game of the Year, Split Fiction. 2K is putting out Civilization 7 to give you a reason to use those mouse controls. Warner Brothers is giving us Hogwarts Legacy, and IO Interactive is putting its excellent Hitman World of Assassination compilation on there as well. Some more from Japanese publishers, Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma and Fantasy Life I are on there for you cozy life sickos. Square Enix are throwing a new remaster of Bravely Default into the mix, and Koei Tecmo has its strategy game Nobunaga's Ambition Awakening to give you a second reason to use the mouse controls. Deltarune isn't made by a Japanese publisher, but it feels like it belongs in this block as well. And finally, CD Projekt Red has Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition on there, which has surely got to be the most technically demanding game on the system at launch, so if you need a system strainer, then this is probably your best bet, and a third reason to use mouse controls. Though after having spoken to CD Projekt Red, they tell me that we really shouldn't sleep on the gyro aim controls either. Alright, that's all the Switch 2 stuff, but for those of you who either don't have one or don't care, here's what else you can look forward to next week. On Tuesday, June 10th, we get Mind's Eye, which is the new game from Leslie Benzies and his studio called Build a Rocket Boy. Benzies was of course one of the lead developers on GTA and had a very long history with Rockstar, and his new game kind of looks like GTA, but obviously much smaller in scale. They say the story for this one is on the shorter side of things, but the big feature is seemingly the creation tools that let players create new scenarios within the engine, kind of like Fortnite customs. You can only build stuff on PC, but the game and all user-created content will be playable on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. Watched a bunch of previews for this one, including one from friend of the channel, Mr. Matty Plays, and yeah, things are not looking great here, to be honest. A lot of concern from a lot of people about, bugs and core gameplay and storytelling and just a whole bunch of things. Let me put it this way. I would not be pre-ordering this one, or any game really, but you know what I mean. Joining Mind's Eye on Tuesday is June Awakening for all platforms bar Switch. This is the open world survival crafting game from Funcom, who made Conan Exiles a little while back, and it's based on the Dune license, and it's incorporating a lot of the Dune lore and world to create something that honestly looks kind of cool. Austin played through the beta of this one, and his verdict based on that playtest was that, yeah, this is a really familiar gameplay loop if you've ever played one of these before, but the Dune elements are woven into the gameplay really well, and they streamlined a lot of the busy work that you usually have to expect from the genre, and the visual presentation is excellent, which is ultimately what kind of sold it for him. Definitely curious to give this one a go, if only to see how the game handles the whole still suit thing, drinking your own urine. That's always kind of weirded me out. Rounding out the week are two re-releases, sort of. First is Warhammer 40k Space Marine Master Crafted Edition for PC and Xbox Series consoles on June 10th, which was only announced last week and will deliver all the sort of upgrades you expect from a modern day remaster. And the second one is Stellar Blade, which is finally coming out on PC with unlocked frame rates, DLSS, and ultra-wide support. Gentlemen, please use that ultra-wide respectfully. Now, obviously, it's a big week for Nintendo, but if you don't have the means for a Switch 2 but want some fresh Nintendo vibes regardless, then put this one on your radar. This is Pipistrello and the Cursed Yoyo, a game we mentioned in the coming out segment a few weeks ago, but now that we've had the chance to actually play it, we think it's worth putting the spotlight back on it. Basically, if people never stop making games for the Game Boy Advance, it feels like we'd have tons of cool games exactly like this. Imagine a top-down Zelda game, except it's set in the modern day, and you're taking down corporations with a yo-yo that houses the spirit of your aunt. If that premise hasn't piqued your interest, then the creative gameplay might. You'd think a yo-yo weapon would be a gimmick with only a few tricks, like, walk the dog around the world, etc. I don't know, but this game actually constantly uses it in increasingly inventive ways for both combat and puzzle solving, and the inventiveness just hasn't stopped during our time with it. Lots of fun, very colorful and creative, so do go back and give this one another look if you missed it. We've left a link to it over at our Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this on your radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and the Epic Game Store is still doing their whole mystery game thing, which means either the games are going to be great or really bad, we don't really know, but the last few have been great. Until Friday, you can grab the excellent Limbo along with Tiny Tina's Wonderland, which I really liked. Maybe this is Randy's way of saying sorry for his recent douchebaggery. Sony are really milking that Bungie purchase because the PlayStation Plus Essential tier this week delivers Destiny 2, The Final Shape, along with the Jet Set Radio homage Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. You can also get NBA 2K25 and the Alone in the Dark reboot featuring David Harbour and Jodie Comer. That was not bad, actually. Those games are available for everyone to claim, but on the PS Plus catalog for the higher tiers, we've got even more Destiny 2. The Legacy Collection is on there, as is GTA 3, Another Crab's Treasure, and Skull and Bones. Ew. Myst and Riven are also coming to the classic catalog, so if you finished Blueprints and need some more obtuse puzzling, then they got you covered. On Nintendo Switch Online this week, there are naturally going to be a handful of GameCube games coming to the service for the Switch 2 launch, though these are only playable on the Switch 2. No idea why that's the case, but whatever. They're kicking things off with three of the best games from everyone's favorite console with a carry handle, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, F-Zero GX, and Soul Calibur 2 from Bandai Namco, which of course featured Link as a playable fighter. For the PS2 version, it was Hayachi from Tekken, and the Xbox version had Spawn for some reason. Kind of weird. And as a bonus, last week they announced a couple of new features for Nintendo 64 Classics if you're playing them on the Switch 2. These include control remapping, a rewind feature, and most important of all, a CRT filter. Power of the Switch 2 at work, folks. Our feel-good story for the week comes courtesy of Ed, who keeps his finger firmly on the pulse of the fighting game scene. Recently, DreamCon was held in Texas, and as part of that, they had themselves a little Street Fighter 6 tournament. At one point, a competitor by the name of J-Force stepped up to the plate. See if you can spot anything unusual about the way he plays. That's right, this dude literally holds the controller upside down, and what's even wilder is that he hasn't even remapped anything. So bro is literally pressing left to go right and down to jump. What the fuck? Apparently, the story is this guy would game with his brother growing up, and his brother never told him that he was holding the controller the wrong way, so he just made it work. I gotta say, as an older brother, tricking your little brother to hold a controller upside down for the rest of his life is some S-tier older brother shit. I mean, the best I could manage is convincing my brother that the Mad Catz controller was actually the good one. So mad respect, my friend, well played. All right, ladies and gents, time for me to get on that airplane over to LA. Well, not really, I actually fly tomorrow after I watch the Sony State of Play and hopefully after I unbox my shiny Switch 2. I also got sent some Final Fantasy Magic cards early, so if you bump into me at LA and play Magic, then be sure to whip out that big deck of yours. I want to see it. I did say deck, by the way, just to be clear. Don't want any confusion on that one. Anyway, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you liked it, then be sure to drop it a like. And if you want to come back and do it all again next week, then be sure to subscribe and ding that notification bell. Follow us over on Spotify and leave a 5-star rating over there if you're feeling so inclined. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye.